Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Tiny Blue Games. My name, of course, is Seesaw or Chris, and today we're playing and talking about one of my favorite MMOs ever, and that's Maplestory. Now, for a lot of people, Maplestory is sort of an introductory MMO. Like, when we talk about what MMO did you first ever play, there's a few options that come up. I mean, it depends on how older you are, but for my generation, it's often the RuneScape or Maplestory. Those seem to be the two answers I hear the most. Now, there's obviously a ton of other games that you might have started with, and that they're perfectly great games. But I started with Maplestory. And for me, that makes it a very, very special game. And anyone who played RuneScape first, you get that feeling too, that whatever game you played first, it's very impactful and it makes you feel extremely nostalgic about the game. Now, I wanted to make a video just talking about what kind of impact this game had on me and how the game itself has changed over its existence, which has been a really long time. I think it's been out for, what, 14 years, 13 years, something like that? I think it came out 2003. Either way, this is not a factual video. This is more of a theoretical, fun, talky video, so you can just look up when it came out, because that doesn't really matter. But what we are going to talk about is why it mattered. Because this game is nothing special, really, especially to today's standards. Like, it's a 2D game, which already turns a lot of people off, but you pretty much just go around killing things. There's not a ton of endgame, and it's kind of boring for a lot of people. And then don't even get me started with like pay to win and what changes have been good, what changes have been bad to the game. There's a lot of negativity that people have about this game, but a lot of the changes they did make were good too. So we're going to take a little look at everything and sort of see how I feel about the game now. But to begin, we should probably look at how I started the game. So Maplestory was the first MMO I ever played. It was like one of the first video games I ever played too. The only game I had ever gotten into before this game was on PlayStation 2, and that was Jak and Daxter, which that series is like amazing too, but we're not talking about that today. We're talking about Maplestory. So this really opened my mind to the idea of playing with other people online, because before that I'd only played, single player console games, and I didn't even think of the idea of a whole world being online. So Maplestory blew me away in that regards, and rightfully so, because I think Maplestory was one of the best exploration MMOs when it was first released. And I'll sort of explain that. Like, you can argue that today there's a lot more different worlds in Maplestory and a lot more different areas to go and explore, but back then the exploration had such meaning. I mean, you pretty much walked everywhere. And when you did take ships to different continents, you actually had to wait for the frickin' ship to arrive, buy a ticket, and then actually sit on the ship while it traveled, which seems absolutely tedious. And for anyone who regularly plays the game now, I mean, it's much more convenient just to teleport places, and it does add enjoyment to the game. But back then, that made it so meaningful when you did travel. When you were like level 30, and you were like, well, I'm going to go and pack my stuff and travel to Ludibrium to find my true treasure. It made it feel like, hey, I'm going to spend the next hour traveling here because I think I'm ready to get there. And it really made it a very exciting time because you were exploring these new areas, and if it didn't work out, you would have to travel back and you'd have to take time and money to get back. And it was a very interesting feeling that way. The other thing that made it very unique in terms of traveling is that it was difficult. Like, monsters could outright kill you just by touching you. And in a 2D game, it's very hard to move past certain monsters because you're just going to run into them. Whereas 3D, you can kind of sneak around people and stuff like that. So there's certainly areas that you just couldn't get to because you weren't good enough to go there. So that was a very interesting thing as well. And a lot of those things have changed over the years. I mean, now you can just teleport everywhere. I mean, there's things that teleport you in-game for free, such as the sort of, it's kind of like their quest helper system that you just push a button and it shows you a bunch of areas that are, suitable for your level and take you there. And it's a very convenient thing that actually helps new players a lot. So I think this change was pretty good. I just nostalgically miss the idea of traveling places and it taking forever. The other big thing in terms of exploration that I think has changed a fair bit is the mysteriousness of certain bosses in the game. back when I played it, the main bosses that I knew about were the mushroom bosses. So you had the mush mom, the mush dad, the blue mush mom. Like, you had all these mushrooms that were very difficult bosses, and actually also very difficult to find. For instance, for the mush mom, you'd have to go to this very specific map, and you'd have to sort of flip through the channels to find it and wait around for it. And it was actually a very difficult place to get to because it was kind of jumping puzzly / like filled with metal pigs, and people didn't like going through that sort of maze to get there. So it was actually a difficult boss to get to, and then difficult to find, and then also difficult to kill for a lot of people who were lower level. But the rewards were extremely good. For instance, they'd drop LB throwing stars, which back then would be a extremely high-priced item that were very difficult to find in game. And it made it very exciting. Now, there are still all those bosses in the game, and you could actually argue that Maplestory is more boss-focused than it's ever been before, because there is dailies that you can do for bosses, and they're quite rewarding as well. But the thing that really changes is that, you know, they're kind of easier to find, easier to do for people, and so many people are doing them, it devalues doing them, where like everyone can just go and do it, and it doesn't feel as special. I don't know. Let me know if you feel that way too. That might just be my nostalgicness talking, but I do feel like it's gotten less special. Some of the things that have stayed the same are some of the monsters you can fight. I love going back and, you know, fighting like very specific monsters that I used to fight, and this is a great example of it. These little Celion like guys are the cutest things that I ever remember fighting back, like when I was back in 2007 I fought these, and it was just as good to fight them now. I think their like actual maps have stayed fairly similar, which is very interesting because a lot of maps have changed, and that's kind of one of the more negative things I have to say. Maplestory has removed a lot of sort of hidden maps that were very good, such as Pig Beach, Forest of the Golem. Those two in particular got removed, and those were probably the most influential maps, or the ant tunnel as well, with the two different types of mushrooms. Those three maps were incredibly influential in terms of like where I leveled my characters, and having them removed doesn't really make much sense to me, because it's not like leaving them in would have done any harm. And it's not like they replaced the maps themselves. So I don't actually know why they removed. Maybe they had a statement on this when it happened, and I just wasn't playing for it. But it doesn't make sense to me why they would actually take content out of the game, especially content that was so nostalgic. When you see people going back to play private servers in Maplestory, 90% of them, like 90% of the private servers advertise, you know, hey, Forest of the Golem, or Pig Beach, or come experience Ant Tunnel again. So it seems like such an easy thing for Nexon to have left in the game that would have been meaningful to people. Because I mean, if I could make a new character and still go and fight in the exact same places I used to fight, even if it was completely different and revamped, but the same like general areas, I think that would make it so much better than it is today. The other thing that really plays with that is the music. I think that one of the most influential and best parts that I remember about Maplestory is the background music that certain maps had. From the intro music to the music you'd hear in the Forest of the Golem, or the Elinia Tree. I think we all know what song we're talking about there. The music was absolutely breathtaking, and that added to the sense of exploration, and was also something that didn't necessarily need to change. Now, a lot of the songs are still in the game and you can hear them, which is great, but some songs have seemed to be removed from the game, and I just don't understand why that had to happen. Like, yes, updating things is great, but why would you change things that you know people are absolutely in love with? It just doesn't make sense. Either way, I still often go on YouTube and find a playlist of the original background music for Maplestory, and I love listening to it if I'm studying or doing homework or just, you know, chilling out, because it is absolutely great music. So I guess we have to talk about some of the bigger changes that have happened to the game. Let's talk about leveling and difficulty. So the game used to be extremely difficult in terms of actually getting to the max level, which was 200. That would take you like 4 years if you were pretty decent at leveling. For me, I was pretty like new at games. We already established that. It would take me about a month to get to level 30. And that was, I don't know, it was a big accomplishment when I got someone to level 30, because it was like, hey, I did all this work and now I'm here. And I don't know, I did enjoy the aspect of it taking so long, but I feel like now if it was to take that long and I still had all the commitments and like I was a casual player as I am now, I would be turned off from the game. So I'm kind of okay with it being a bit easier now, although it does remove some of the I don't know, some of the accomplishment from getting to these levels. The other thing they did do, though, was they expanded the level cap to 250. Now, I think this was a good idea, as once you get to the max level in this game, you can do bosses and stuff, but there's no like raiding or dungeons or anything really that are worth doing. So you kind of always need to have training and grinding be a part of the game. So I think if they're smart, they'll continue to expand the level cap even further. And it seems like they did learn some of their lessons from expanding the level cap, because the 200 to 250 has more of a like old Maplestory grind feel to it, where it takes you a really long time. And because of that, getting to 250 after even like a year of it being out is still quite the accomplishment. So if they continue to do that and say, you know, go to 300 now and make it like really, really long to get to 300, I think they could really make this game actually have a long time viability just by doing that and constantly expanding the world. Now, the other thing that they did do, which is pretty interesting as well, is the well, they did do revamps to classes, but back when I played the game for about 4 years, there was the warriors, magicians, thieves, and bowmen. And right near when I was leaving, they finally introduced the pirate class, which was super exciting because, you know, adding classes to the game had never really been talked about or done before. And this was like, oh my god, we're going to get a new class. This is super exciting. And then, you know, turn to today where there's like over 20 different classes, each of them different skills, different like times and stories in the Maplestory world, different like subclasses and stuff like that. There is a ton of classes. And I think this was, for the most part, a good thing. The negative aspect of it, though, is that they've added so many classes now that I think a lot of the classes are starting to blend together, because it's all about big AoE attacks and movement. And, you know, there's not a ton that they can do to really differentiate them. So I think instead of more horizontal options in terms of classes, I think what they should do is focus on more vertical class progression. And we've already seen this happen as well, where we did finally get the 5th jobs introduced to Maplestory. And I think people, you know, were a lot more excited about that, as opposed to just another horizontal class that's happened so many times before. Now, the issue of that is they've added so many of these classes that every time they add a vertical class, it becomes so much more work, because they have to think of all 20 classes instead of the original just 5 of them. And I think that is challenging, but I do think it's better to progress horizontally that way, because the class system in Maplestory is one of the best parts of the game, and one of the parts of the game that no game has beaten for me. The idea of getting to level 30 in a warrior and be able to choose between 3 different types of warrior and not being able to remake that decision really makes it so important and so interesting. You know, you feel very distinct as a spearman as opposed to, you know, a crusader or something like that in the future. It just makes you feel very, very distinct, and I think other games should actually look into that kind of system. But I think that's one of the things Maplestory did really, really well. Now, I've talked a lot about, you know, the pros and cons and a lot of the nostalgic feelings I had for Maplestory, but let's kind of talk about, in this last little bit, some of the issues that Maplestory's had. So we have the idea of it being a pay-to-win game, and this is something that was kind of the case, you know, back when I played, but it became definitely worse as time moved on, where you could buy these potential things, and a lot of it was done through the cash shop, and it, you know, it blurred the lines between pay-to-win and pay for convenience, and it got really messy. And I don't know why they had to change the system they had. I mean, it was, I think, very much a case of short-term gain gains and long-term pain, where they didn't realize that although they'd make a bit of money because people wanted to be very powerful, people would start quitting because they're like, shit, I hate the fact that Maplestory is pay to win now. So that's kind of the situation. And I think they've realized that themselves, and it's really given a lot of hope to Maplestory with this reboot server that's become quite popular, where, you know, they've stepped away from that sort of idea of it being about pay to win, and now it's back to pay for convenience, where you're paying for a pet and, you know, equipment for that pet, which is very required for the reboot server. So they're still making some money, but it's not forcing you to buy, you know, potential and stuff like that, which is a really good way of doing it. The last thing I want to end off on, which is, I don't know, a weird sort of topic, I guess, to end off on, is just the idea of scrolling items. I don't know why that had to change. I don't mind, like, the whole new system where you sort of star them up, but scrolls were so cool. Why did we have to remove that from the game? I don't know, like, the first thing I do when I go back to private servers is I go to very specific maps that are not in the game anymore, and I go and scroll items, because that's like super fun, and I miss the idea of seeing scrolls drop that are very rare, like glove attack scrolls. Come on, that used to be the best part of the game. Either way, I would love to hear what you guys think. Have you guys played Maplestory? What change got, you know, the biggest positive and negative reaction from you? Let me know in the comments below. Thanks for watching, guys. I'll see you in the next video.